Hi, I am back with my notes on House of Leaves. Today we'll be working on Chapter 4. We're going to start with the epigraph up here. Specifically the name of the character, Diedrich Knickerbocker. He's actually a fictional character from A History of New York by Washington Irving. But I want to talk about another story by Washington Irving, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which ends with a postscript which questions the authenticity of the story. And I'm just going to read part of it. Or I'll just read the whole thing here. It's very short, and I think it has some stuff to say. The preceding tale is given almost in the precise words in which I heard it related at a corporation meeting of the ancient city of Manhattan, at which were present many of its sagest and most illustrious burghers. The narrator was a pleasant, shabby, gentlemanly old fellow in pepper and salt clothes, with a sadly humorous face, and one whom I strongly suspected of being poor. He made such efforts to be entertaining. When the story was concluded, there was much laughter and approbation, particularly from 2 or 3 deputy aldermen who had been asleep for a greater part of the time. There was, however, one tall, dry-looking old gentleman with beetling eyebrows, who maintained a grave and rather severe face throughout, now and then folding his arms, inclining his head, and looking down upon the floor as if turning a doubt over in his mind. He was one of your wary men, who never laugh but upon good grounds, when they have reason and the law on their side. When the mirth of the rest of the company had subsided and silence was restored, he leaned one arm on the elbow of his chair, and sticking the other akimbo, demanded, with a slight but exceedingly sage motion of the head and contraction of the brow, which was the moral of the story, and what it went to prove. The storyteller, who was just putting a glass of wine to his lips as a refreshment after his toils, paused for a moment, looked at his inquirer with an air of infinite deference, and lowering the glass slowly to the table, observed that the story was intended most logically to prove that there is no situation in life but has its advantages and pleasures, provided we will but take a joke as we find it. That therefore he that runs races with goblin troopers is likely to have rough riding of it. Ergo, for a country schoolmaster to be refused the hand of a Dutch heiress is a certain step to high preferment in the state. The cautious old gentleman knit his brows tenfold closer after this explanation, being sorely puzzled by the ratiocination of the syllogism, while methought the one in pepper and salt eyed him with something of a triumphant leer. At length he observed that all this was very well, but still he thought the story a little on the extravagant. There were 1 or 2 points on which he had his doubts. "Faith, sir," said the storyteller, "as to that matter, I don't believe one half of it myself." So it's interesting that we have this conversation in this story about what the moral of the story is, what the meaning of the story is, and the storyteller is basically it's bubkiss. Like, it's a joke, don't take it too seriously. I think that's interesting in regards to us searching for meaning in House of Leaves. Is there really any meaning? Is it just all for fun? Are we going to be that serious man, or are we going to be the cautious old gentleman, the storyteller? Who are we in this storyline, and what do we want to get out of it? Okay, we also get the first mention of the Unheimlich here, this idea of not being at home. Through on page 26 here, we get this notion that something's really off, and this is written by Johnny as Navidson discovers the hallway. So this is kind of the first crossover between Navidson and Zampano and Johnny's story that is not a fictitious implant by Johnny, as with the water heater in previous chapters. And we see that further over here at the idea of the camera lucida, and I have a note here explaining what that is. It's a device that allows the artist to see both the scene and their drawing at the same time, so it allows them to duplicate key points. And so, like, we are getting dual stories here. So we are looking through a camera lucida. We are seeing whatever we want to see is the real scene and the artistic scene. We could argue that Johnny is the real scene, and that the Navidson story is the drawing or the duplicate, or we could do vice versa, whereas the Navidson story is the real story and Johnny's is the duplicate. Either way, there's duplication in the perspectives here. And we get a bit of foreshadowing here, where Johnny walks out into the hallway. That's a mistake. Just a little hint there that I think was interesting. And on to page 28 down here, we get a reference to this poem, Orpheus, Eurydice, and Hermes, by Rainer Maria Rilke. Rilke is quoted very often in House of Leaves, and I just like to read this poem. It is quite long, so bear with me, but I think it's relevant, and I'll put a link to the poem in the description as well. This was the eerie mine of souls. Like silent silver ore, they veined its darkness. Between roots, the blood that flows off into humans welled up, looking dense as porphyry in the dark. Otherwise there was no red. There were cliffs and unreal forests, bridges spanning emptiness, and that huge, grey, blind pool hanging above its distant floor, like a stormy sky over a landscape. And between still, gentle fields, a pale strip of road unwound. They came along this road. In front, the slender man in the blue cloak, mute, impatient, looking straight ahead. Without chewing, his footsteps ate the road in big bites, and both his hands hung heavy and clenched by the pore of his garment, and forgot all about the light lyre, becoming like a part of his left hand, rose tendrils strung in the limbs of an olive. His mind like two minds, while his gaze ran ahead like a dog, turned, and always came back from the distance to wait at the next bend. His hearing stayed close like a scent. At times it seemed to reach all the way back to the movements of the two others, who ought to be following the whole way up. And sometimes it seemed there was nothing behind him but the echo of his own steps, the small wind made by his cloak. And yet, he told himself, they were coming, once, said it out loud, heard it die away. They were coming. Only there were two who moved with terrible stillness. Had he been allowed to turn around just once, wouldn't that look back mean the disintegration of this whole work still to be accomplished? Of course he would have seen them, two dim figures walking silently behind. The god of journeys and secret tidings, shining eyes inside the traveler's hood, the slender wand held out in front of him, and wings beating at his ankles, and his left hand held out to her. This woman who was loved so much that from one lyre more mourning came than from women in mourning, that a whole world was made from mourning, where everything was present once again, forest and valley and road and village, field, river and animal, and that around this mourning world, just as around the other earth, a sun and a silent star-filled sky wheeled, a morning sky with displaced constellations, this woman who was loved so much. But she walked alone, holding the god's hand, her footsteps hindered by her long grave clothes, faltering, gentle, and without impatience. She was inside herself like a great hope, and never thought of the man who walked ahead, or the road that climbed back toward life. She was inside herself, and her being dead filled her like tremendous depth. As a fruit is filled with its sweetness and darkness, she was filled with her big death, still so new that it hadn't been fathomed. She found herself in a resurrected virginity, her sex closed like a young flower at nightfall, and her hands were so weaned from marriage that she suffered from the light god's endlessly still guiding touch as from too great an intimacy. She was no longer the blonde woman who sometimes echoed in the poet's songs, no longer the fragrance, the island of their wide bed, and no longer the man's to possess. She had already loosened like long hair and surrendered like the rain, and issued like massive provisions. She was already root. And when all at once the god stopped her, and with pain in his voice spoke the words, "He has turned around," she couldn't grasp this, and quietly said, "Who?" But far off, in front of the bright door, stood someone whose face had grown unrecognizable. He just stood and watched how on the strip of road through the field the god of secret tidings with a heartbroken expression silently turned to follow the form already starting back along the same road, footsteps hindered by long grave clothes, faltering, gentle, and without impatience. So that is Rilke's version of the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Where Orpheus went to Hades to reclaim the soul of Eurydice to try and bring her back to life, on the condition that he did not turn around and look at her, but he did. So we have like that love story. We could equate that to Nabaton and Karen, maybe. The idea of this eerie mine of souls, this dark place, maybe being equivalent to the house, and seeking that one pinprick of light that he sees, that we know that Nabaton sees at the end, and he actually does follow it out to Karen there. And we get Hermes. I haven't come to a conclusion yet on the role of Hermes in House of Leaves, but he comes up very frequently, but never like directly named. So yeah, I'll be talking about that more when those references come up. But Hermes is the god, the messenger god, the god as Rilke calls him, the god of secret tidings. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, so again, back to the poem. It's not the first or last reference to Orpheus, Eurydice, or Hermes, or Rilke, for that matter. It's on page 604. Let me find the page here. 604. Here, we get a reference to Orpheus in Polyphena's letter. I think that's her calling Johnny Orpheus. The way you turned your back on your mother and only looked back twice. Not twice should have been more than enough. After all, once was too much for Orpheus. Get that reference there. And then on page 574, here again we get another reference in a Pelican poem to Eurydice. Here, we hold our dreams and lost dreams and tear our hearts out over chance. She carried the songs of centuries, and in her passing my madness passed. So I thought that was interesting. Could this be Johnny calling Polyphena Eurydice? Who is he trying to bring back to life in this book? We have a lot of questions about, who is actually alive and dead in this book, and what is it trying to resurrect? Who is it trying to resurrect, if anything? Yeah. Here we have a reference to the pain that Nabaton feels in his feet. So this is the first reference to it, I believe. He has a troublesome sorry, I'm trying to talk too fast. He has a troublesome skin condition he has had since childhood, has recently begun to flare up around his toes, wincing slightly at what we can assume is at least moderate pain. And so, yeah, this is the first reference to feet, and I don't know if, sorry, I've got to fix that, it's driving me crazy. I don't know if maybe Mark Zidonowski has a bit of a fetish or something, but feet feature a lot, especially toes, in House of Leaves. So this is the first reference to feet, and Nabaton's feet being sore. Page 72 over here. It goes up here. Johnny stubs his toe. We learn there that his toe is sore. Page 376. I'm going to go in order here. 376. Always flipping back and forth in this book. We have a reference to Johnny worrying about bumping the manuscripts with his foot. He says, eventually I had numerous piles spread out across my room. I usually placed a book or some heavy objects on them to keep the isolated mounds from flying apart if there was a draft or I happened to bump one with my foot. So he's again worried about injuring his feet. Page 526. Here towards the end of the book. Nabaton's foot is healed. The skin condition plaguing my feet for all these years has completely vanished. So what could all this possibly mean? Well, as always, we can find answers in the Whalestow letters back here on page 587, where Polyphena tells us, Also, remember love inhabits more than just the heart and mind. If need be, it can take shelter in a big toe. Now, Mark Z. Danilowski has said that House of Leaves is a love story, and we get all these people with foot pain. Navidson heals his, but only after him and Karen come back together and rekindle their love. So yeah, bit weird, but feet in House of Leaves are important. Page 30, we get a reference to Karen as a reluctant Eve. I'm keeping notes of like different religious imagery throughout the book, so that's just something I noted there. Yeah. Page 31 here, we get references to Zampano's gun, the battered shotgun bearing the initials RLB. So, this is a very specific gun. RLB stamped rifles were government issued to World War II. They are Ithaca Model 37s, and Ithaca, as we know, is the home of the great journeyer Odysseus. So, we get a reference in this really roundabout way to Odysseus and journeys there, as we know that we are following a journey through the house in the book. We are also told that the gun has the initial P inscribed in it and an exploding bomb. And there's maybe a theory that P could stand for Polyphena, so that links Zampano with Polyphena. We get more information about this gun on page 554. There's a letter that tells us that it is the World War II Ithaca Model 37 trench gun. Yeah, I thought that was quite interesting to note. So again, we get that reference again to Zampano being a veteran of some sort. Okay, down here as well. But I've come to believe errors, especially written errors, are often the only markers left by solitary life. Now, Danilowski has gone on record saying that there are no errors in the book, that everything is done on purpose. So it's very important that we pay attention to these errors in the text. I've been keeping a list of the misspelled words, trying to figure something out with that. For me, this links to page 137. 137. Here we get a reference to the bald gnome error. I don't think I've ever quite equaled the bald gnome error, who comes from his cave with featherless ankles to feast on the mighty dead. So featherless ankles immediately got me thinking about Hermes, because he has the feathered ankles, and we've already had a reference to Hermes. And there's more about the bald gnome error on page 547. Right here. Get a reference to them. But it says it's the exact same quote here. I don't think I've ever quite equaled the bald gnome error. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that when I get to the appendix. Just know that errors are important, and I'll talk more about the bald gnome error when we get to that specific reference there. Okay, on to page 32. God, for all intents and purposes, is an equal sign. And Conte's all things being equal, if you search these, it leads to this website. And I'm going to actually do a separate video on that website, and I'll link it down below. Just kind of exploring the website. But I'll put a link to the website down below. And I'm going to suggest that you click the doorway under the entertainment heading, but beware spoilers in that website. It's an interesting website. Page 33. Okay. this spiel about riddles. Answers provide bright moments of comprehension perfectly suited for children who still inhabit a world where solutions are readily available. So I think that's like another note to the readers that we may not get all the answers in this book, and should a book even give a solution, should it neatly wrap up the plot and the questions that the reader has, this book is not obviously one of those books. This book is like a riddle that might not actually have an answer. We also get this line, to read actually comes from the Latin re, to calculate, to think. And aside from giving us reason, erascian also gives us an unlikely sibling, Latin arma, meaning weapons. So I thought of this as like, it's not just the job of the writer to give answers, the reader also has to be a participant. And the quote just reminded me, I know Doctor Who, like, the book predates Doctor Who in this quote, but I just wanted to share this quote because I thought it was interesting. Doctor says, books, the best weapons in the world. Yeah. Just something fun. You gotta have fun with the book, right? Okay, then we're going to jump over to page 35. And we have this reference over here to a word. It doesn't matter what the word is, but it says, a certain co-ed taught me that. And here we think maybe co-ed could mean like a female student, which we'd probably assume if we'd only just read this part of the book, but it could also mean the Comprehensive Oxford English Dictionary, which was given to Johnny by Pelafina, and we know that because on page 594, she tells us, did your co-ed teach you that one? So I thought that was interesting. Okay, and then we get this reference to Amber Brightacre. She has a barbed wire tattoo and blue and red encircling her ankle. So blue, I called it Zampano's color because it will show up in his writing, where the word house is written in blue. In red, I argued that was Johnny's color. And again, with the feet being a reference there, I just thought that was something interesting to point out. Page 37, we get this reference, then in fact all of Troy seemed to me to sink into flames. This is a reference to a quote over here. Yeah. And Carthage must be destroyed. So I thought this was interesting because Troy was thought to be a fictional city, just like we think the house to be a fictional place, but it was actually, archaeological evidence of it was actually found in 1870, so it turned out to be a real place and not a fictional place. I just thought that was an interesting tidbit. Page 38, we get this reference to Fred Sabernath, and he says, les jeux sont faits, nous sommes faits. Yeah, which is French, which means the game is done, we are fucked. It's, the first part, at least, is a roulette, or a gambling term, meaning, like, no more bets. So when you're, like, rolling the dice, no more bets, on the table. The game's over. It may also mean, like, the dice are cast, as, like, a dual meaning. And it's this, Sartre had a book, titled that called The Dice Are Cast, which is also often translated as The Chips Are Down. And I thought it was an interesting look at the book. So I'm just going to read, I just like copied and pasted some stuff from Wikipedia. I haven't actually read the book, but I thought this kind of explained some stuff. So the plot of The Chips Are Down by Sartre concerns two characters, Pierre Dumaine and Yves Charlier, and they are predestined to be soulmates, but this destiny is prevented by their premature violent deaths, and they don't meet until passing into the afterlife. So Pierre and Yves realize different truths about their own lives as they walk invisibly as ghosts amongst the living, with the power to interact only with other deceased souls. Neither is able to completely dissociate themselves from the things that were once important to them, and they realize that by not concentrating on their love, they might be sacrificing their second chance at life. So I thought that was really interesting. This idea of people that are already dead trying to come together, but failing to do so because they're so much concentrated on the minutiae in their life as opposed to each other. So we could argue that maybe Pelafina and Zampano, both presumed dead, probably had a second chance at life in the book, but were so concerned with all this little stuff going on that they'd never have a chance to get back together. But Karen and Navidson maybe are like the foil to that, in that they are able to overcome the little things and come together in life and overcome their deaths or their non-existence, if you want to argue that. We also have the Latin phrase, which means the same thing. Forgive my Latin. Alia icata est. This was probably first said by Menander in one of his plays. And I'll read part of it here. Person A says, "You will not marry if you're in your senses when you have left this life, for I myself did marry, so I recommend you not to." B says, "The matter is decided, the die is cast." And then A says, "Go on then, I do wish you then well over it. But you are taking arms with no good reason against a sea of troubles, in the ways of the deep Libyan or Aegean Sea. Scarce 3 of 30 ships are lost or wrecked, but scarcely one poor husband escapes at all." So that was interesting that we have this phrase in this play. A lot of my references are like very reaching, but I love finding these little things, so forgive me for this being like maybe a big reach, but that line from the play, "But you are taking arms with no good reason against a sea of troubles," was reiterated in Hamlet by Shakespeare, or to take arms against a sea of trouble, line from To Be or Not to Be speech. And Hamlet is directly referenced on page 621. Oh, 1 second here. 621. Yeah. Yeah. Unsung Rituals, Hamlet. Right there. Sorry for knocking the camera. Yeah, and as we also know that Ulysses was a big reference in sorry for moving things. James Joyce and Ulysses was a big influence also on Mark Danilowski, and Hamlet was the framework for Ulysses. So yeah, maybe a bit of a reach, but I'm still going there. And Fred de Stabernath, I wrote this down and I couldn't confirm this, but I think he was a real soldier who died at Dien Bien Phu, which was the battle that Zampano likely fought in the Indo-China War, which predates the Vietnam War. The references to all the women's names in the introduction are references to the hills in that battle. Yeah, and so that is it. This note goes to this page. So that is it for chapter 4. Let me know your thoughts on this. If you wonder if I'm reaching a bit too far, let me know. And thank you for watching.